Okay, so a really short, sharp podcast this week because I wanted to talk about mastering the fundamentals of sales and selling. And I've built a model called the 7-Figure Blueprint, which I believe is the starting point of mastering sales and getting where you want to get to. And I'm going to share with you these 6 concepts with you now, and then probably I'll cover off in other podcasts the elements around where they fit in. But these 6 are the fundamental elements of how you can master sales and become very successful with sales and selling. So the first one is this: foundations. You have to have very strong foundations in place. Your foundations are the bedrock of everything you do. You wouldn't build a house on sand or literally on foundations that weren't rock solid. Any building has to have great foundations. And the foundations that you need to have in your business that work for you or your company are critical. And if you don't have those foundations, you're not going to be able to achieve what you want to. And the foundations for me around sellings are your vision and your why. Why are you doing this? What are you hoping to achieve? Be crystal clear around that vision and why, and know that that is essential to what you're doing. It will be your North Star, as I call it. Your skills and your habits, the things that you do day to day, your foundations, the things that are ingrained in you as a sales or business person to become successful, the things that you know, whether it's your routines for getting up, it's your process for doing certain activities, and how you're focused on developing your skills. The third part of foundations of building the foundations are your plans and the systems that you have. You've got a target to hit 50,000. Don't just put that target out there and have no idea of how you're going to hit that. Build a plan to say, I know how I'm going to hit that. I know the journey that people are going to go on to go through that. There's a brilliant video I share on sales plan. Have a look at it on YouTube. How you hit your sales, but have a plan for what you're going to do, and the systems that you use are crucial to save yourselves time, and to the systems and process for that are vital. And then the fourth element around your building blocks are all about your USP, your service, what you offer, what difference does it make in the market. Most companies will always say, oh, we do a great service because we do great things. Do you know what? Half the time it doesn't work. You know, it's noise. No company ever says we do a crap service. You've got to really be clear about what you do and what you offer to make sure we can then target the right people from there. So those are the first one about mastering sales. Your foundations are critical. Make sure you put those in place. Second point then is for me around mastering sales is to think like a buyer. This is probably my biggest area that I'm focusing on in my whole area of work at the moment, is thinking like the customer or the buyer you're trying to engage with. And the four areas around that, which people get so badly wrong, all the time I see this. And the reason I put this stuff before other areas at the end around selling and closing is because these are critical factors to mastering sales. The first one is understand human behaviors. Become a geek around understanding people and the way that people operate as a human at a human level. Understand what they do, how they do, where they do, what they do, why they do what they do is critical for you to get to know what people are doing and where they're about. And if you understand people, you're in great shape. The second part about thinking is emotional intelligence, developing your emotional intelligence, those 5 areas of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-control, motivation, socialization, and empathy. I've shared lots of videos and materials on that, but you have to understand and have emotional intelligence to connect and do the right thing at the right time. The third thing about this is then reading and influencing people. How can you make sure that you're able to read situations and read gestures and read body language from people, the things they're not telling you, the things they don't say, but what they say through their actions or through the things they do, and then influence them to do other different things as a result of that. And then the fourth thing around that is understanding the journey or the shape of the sale. So salespeople that are novices and are beginners always focus on, oh, well, what can I do I've got to get the sale straight away. No, some things take time. Certain industries, you'll need to shape it. It will go from A to B to C to D to E before you get to where you want to be. Understand that most people, especially as the higher the value, the service that you offer, they're not just going to make a quick decision always on that. They're going to go through a thought process, a journey, and you're going to need to understand how you shape that sale and take the right actions at the right time in order to make those things happen. So those foundations are critical. You then got to, as I say, to be able to think like a buyer. And if you get those 2 things in place to start off with, you are going to be in a great position to master sales and achieve success that you want. But then we've then got to go into the elements around, okay, well, now I've done that, how do I actually then start to you really achieve the success that I want to? And my third area that I talk about in mastering sales is your foundations. Is finding clients. And being honest with you, you've got to be able to focus on finding people by looking and understanding. People only buy because of two reasons: their problem or desire. So unless you can focus on understanding their problems and desires of a marketplace and who that person is and knowing that audience and that specific audience, you're going to fail. So firstly, start to understand specific groups of people that you target. You should know that from your unique selling proposition and the engagement and your service you have. We are good at working with these types of people, these type of characteristics. Know that and know what the problems and challenges that those people are facing, and start spending some time on that. It's going to be your critical factor to selling. The other key element to that then is, how do we then start to go and find these people? How do we start to engage them? And you only have two choices if you want to master sales. You either need to have people come to you, what I call inbound opportunities. So people that will reach out to you and say, hey, James, I'd like to work with you. Hey, Darren, I've seen your podcast stuff and I think it's brilliant. I want to work with you, which are inbound opportunities. Or we as salespeople have to go outbound and find people. And we do that through making calls. We do that through doing videos. We do that through video marketing, video outreach, I should say. We do that through social media. We do that through emails. We do that through meeting people at networking events. We have to go and take the action. So you're not going to find business opportunities unless you can take the action to go out and find them, or they come to you. And as I always say to people, if your ship doesn't come in, you have to swim out to it in order to get what you want. So that's finding people. That's point number 3. Then we're into the fourth area, which is the bit that's great fun. It's the biggest part of selling that I love because I'm a curious person, and that's understanding the other person, getting to know them specifically. So how can you then start to what I would call break down barriers? How can you start to get them to want to have a conversation with you, to want to discuss something with you, to want to give you their time, which is the most important thing they have? And once you've understood and broken through that surface, and bear in mind your prospects and buyers are like an onion, they'll put barriers up. Once you've broken through that surface, and by the way, that's by adding content and value and making them feel curious and intriguing because you know and understand them, we then get to a point by asking brilliant questions. Questions are your route to sales success. The right type of question asked in the right way at the right time. In my Saturday, my Inside the Mind of the Buyer email, which I send out every Saturday morning, have a look at my website, jameswhite.business, and sign up for that. I talk so much around how you can ask those questions in the right way to open up the door. And when we do that, and when we ask the right questions, and part of asking the right questions is asking questions around the fit for that person and to whether there may be a fit not now, and we nurture them to that point. When we understand people, 70% of selling is on the understanding phase. They're going to want the solution. They're going to want you to tell them what they can do differently. They're going to want to be sold to because you've understood their problem. You've got to know them. They feel like they can build a rapport. You've built rapport with them. You've broken down those barriers. They get you. You're thinking like them, so they want you to help them. And that's where summarizing and selling is easy, which is my fifth element of the building blocks of selling, of mastering sales. Selling is key. How do you then start to be in a position where you summarize your solution and move them to the promised land? How can you show them other people that have gone from where they were to the new place and have felt great as a result of it? How can you then talk to them about money? The issue around money, you should have covered that off in the question process to make sure you're engaging people in the right way. But how can you make sure you talk about those money elements so that if you then give them that belief and trust that you can bring that problem to life for them and solve it? And obviously that might mean you then have to create a proposal and information to send through to them. But the selling bit comes when we move them from that position of pain or that challenge that they've got or that desire they've got to get somewhere to where you want to be. And then the final element around selling is closing. How do we then get them to say, yes, I want to go forward with that? And there may well be some nervousness. There may well be some objections. I'm not sure. I want to have a think about it. How can you master those elements where that person feels totally convinced with you that they then want to say yes? And these are the factors that make a difference when it comes to selling. The people that are successful in sales are able to do that. They're able to listen. They're able to use their intelligence to listen to everything that the buyer is saying to them and not saying to them. And it absolutely is a skill they've learned, they've built up, and they're in a position to then close and do business with people and make disciples of key people that want to work with them because they've done those factors. So those, let me go back, reinforce those 6. Building the foundations, making sure you've got that rock solid. You cannot achieve sales success with shaky foundations. Thinking like your buyer, understanding who that person is and what you're in a position to do to really get to know what's going on in their world. How do we then find them? How do we then break down the barriers and get to know them and understand their situation before we start selling to them and closing to them? And if you can do those, master those 6 areas, I'm going to share with you, an outline, a little graphic, hopefully in the show notes that we can share. If you can master master these 6 areas, I know you will get success, whether it's a business owner or as an individual salesperson. So I hope that's been helped. I always finish the podcast on an inspirational story. And I want to just share a story of a guy. You might have already heard of this guy called Aaron Ralston. He's an engineer and he's a mountain guy in America. And long story short, he was walking in the desert I think it was Nevada or wherever in America. Watch the film. He's written it. He was part of a film that Danny Boyle did called 127 Hours. And basically, he fell down a ravine in America and was going to die unless he cut his own arm off, and had to cut his own arm off with a Swiss Army knife. Watch the film if you want. I nearly was sick into my bag of pick and mix with it. Not an interesting sight for those in the cinema, but the point being is it's a bit of a gruesome part of the film, but you see him at the end. His book's a really interesting read as well. Inspirational story. He basically had no choice but to cut his arm off to survive, and he did. So imagine, if you think about a tough moment, imagine what he had to go through at that time when he had to literally cut off his arm with a Swiss Army knife, all the pain he had to go through to get to the point of being where he was. He came out the other side. He now speaks at events. He did it. What's your inspirational story going to be that's going to help you move forward? Hope that's helped you today. It was a short, sharp, punchy podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have, see you next week. Take care.